All right, so the first thing you'd want to, I have this project stashed on my flash drive. I'm just going to run in and grab like the character. What am I doing? My computer, Louis. I'm just going to run in, set my project to this little like pop figure thing that I made. And I'm just going to run through and really quick open up the last version of this that I have. It will have all my character stuff in it. And resave this file. New background, which I spelled terribly. I also saved that as a Maya binary file. Why does it default to binaries? Don't care that it's spelled wrong. I spell everything wrong. All right. So I'll actually show you guys what I actually have in my scene so far. But this is basically like the camera. So I started out with this background image, and this is like basically what I cropped what I rendered my little person onto. So you can see I have like the basic block in of some of the shapes in the scene. Like I have like this 3D printer box, and I have like some of the stuff on here, like this wad of fabric and this like crappy little printer box and some cables, because that's like when I lit the scene, that's where the shadows ended up being. So I just sort of like modeled that stuff in so that the shadows would have somewhere to be cast onto. So I'm just gonna real quick run through. I have a new background. I figured, you know, certainly never hurts to do multiple different demos, I guess. Also, the other one was like it took me like an actual forever to do. It was awful. But anywho, so the first thing I'm probably gonna do is run through, and where is my outliner? Find my outliner. Cool. I'm just gonna get rid of this camera. All right, so I have, it's like, here's my little figure, it's chilling here in my scene. First thing I'm probably gonna wanna do is create a new camera, which I'm actually not entirely sure if I showed you guys this before. I render out of my perspective camera all the time because I'm lazy. But if you go to the create menu up here, same place you'd find like your curve tools, like your polygon primitives, you'll see this little option for cameras, and if I just mouse over that, I'll just select camera. And you can see that it adds a new camera to my scene. I'm just gonna call this render, oh god, cool. And if I go into wireframe mode, you'll see that it's dumped this new bitty little camera into my scene. If I go to panels, perspective, rank dir, camera, I'll just select that, and I'm now looking through this this little render camera here. All right, it's actually bothering me. So now I'm looking through this. This is basically going to be the camera that I render from. I'm going to lock it into place so that I can't move it, basically. So that, because like once I get it set up with my image plane, I want it to stay there and like not move around, because this is like needs to be at a specific angle for the renders to come out correctly. So I'm just going to go through. I have a personal preference of cropping my images, or like my background images, before I use them. So I usually just crop them to whatever aspect ratio I need. In the meantime, while Photoshop is opening, I'm just going to turn on the resolution gate for this camera. I have a Photoshop. And I'm just going to, I'm just going to drag. So this is the new background that I'm going to use for the object. And I'm just going to make a marquee selection in a fixed ratio, which should be, if you're rendering it at 1920 by 1080, unless I'm going crazy, it should be 16 by 9 for the aspect ratio. So I'll just like drag that out to be as big as I can, and maybe shift that selection around and say, okay, cool, I kind of like don't hate this as this is like acceptable for my background. And I'm just gonna crop the image. Cool. I'll save this. It doesn't really matter, sure, JPEG, why not? To crop. Good. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take that cropped image and dump it into my Maya scene as an image plane. And I want to make sure that when I do this, I'm in my render cam. And that'll basically attach the image plane to my render cam. So again, I'm looking through my render cam right now. I will go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. I will then find my awkward cropped image, throw it into my scene. And you see it shows up in my scene. The reason that I like using cropped images, so I'll really quick, I'll run through and show you guys just like what it looks like if I throw this uncropped image in. But it's hard to it's kind of hard and annoying to get it to line up properly with your gate. And you can do something like fit to resolution gate and it'll like stretch it down. But it's not like super ideal. I just, like if you crop it, you have exact control over what you're rendering and like what you want the background to be, which is why I prefer to crop it in advance. Anyone have any questions about that? All right. All right, so I'm gonna throw in my cropped image back there. Again, I just like having the control over like exactly what I'm rendering. And you'll notice if it ever doesn't fit, like usually if you crop the image, it'll just sort of like fit it in automatically, but you can just click this fit to resolution gate and it'll just sort of like pop it in all nicely. So you'll notice, so like now if I rotate around, the image plane isn't moving, but you can see the object is tumbling around. Oh, one thing you will notice. So if I zoom out of this object, you'll notice that it's sort of like disappearing behind the image plane. Super easy way to fix that. With your camera, with your image plane selected, if you go down to this depth channel here, under placement, like right under the fit to resolution gate button, there's this channel for depth. Just set that to like 1,000. And that'll basically put this farther away from the camera so that you have to really push your object out. Like, that's irrationally tiny. You'd have to like get really, really far away to have your object clip through your image plane. You could even set it farther away if you needed to. Questions about that? All right. So really quick, I'm going to go back into my perspective camera. I'm actually just going to, in case I've never showed you this before, you can change the view in your Maya camera. So like I want this to be my perspective view. So if I press and hold the space bar, it'll pull up this menu. If I left click and hold on this Maya button, it'll bring up this other like awkward menu of cameras, at which point I can just mouse over perspective view, release my mouse button, and now this is my perspective camera. And it's apparently now changing. Wow. Cool. So I just set this to be my render cam, so now I have my perspective guy over here. And I can like kind of move around freely here and leave my render cam as it is. So you'll notice I'm actually going to, if I like translate, I'm moving the render cam now, and because I have that image plane mapped to it, you can see that it's pretty much moving along with the render cam. Like that's how it functions in your scene, if that makes sense. Are there any questions about that? All right. Cool. I'm gonna go back in here. So what I want to do now, so like if I render this right now, it's gonna have, there's gonna be no lights, no shadows, like it's just gonna be sort of like a weirdly rendered person on this image plane. So usually the first thing you'll do is like go in and just block in a little bit of geometry to both help you set up your camera and also to, so you actually have something that shadows can be cast onto. As a personal preference, I'm just gonna set the pivot point to the very top of this cube, and that way, like if I can scale this, and it's not gonna like scale up or down like into my little figure here. So I might just set something like this to be kind of roughly kind of maybe desk shaped. And for the record, I didn't say this before. This is not like the cleanest, most efficient way to do this. This is a sort of like winging it way if you don't have like specific information about your camera aperture or like the lens focal length or whatever that you're using, and like measurements of your room. Like this is like kind of how to wing it, assuming that maybe you have a bad client that's just like, here's a picture, put this object on it. Happens all the time. But there is a more official way to do this, but that's more complicated and annoying, and this is really all you need for this assignment. So So you'll notice, so like I might say, I'm gonna drag this little box over here, go into my wireframe mode, and you can see that it kind of, like it seems like it's not a bad height, but you can see that like this line here is really off. That's because I took this picture on my iPhone, which has like a really weird focal length camera. And my camera in Maya needs to basically have the same or as similar settings as I can get. So if I click on this render cam, or like you can do this with any of your like perspective orthographic cameras, I'll select my render cam, open it in the attribute editor, and usually the settings that I'll focus on are the focal length and the angle of view. So if I change, oh my, you'll notice like if I change this, I'm not actually moving my camera, it's just affecting like how this stuff is basically displayed, or like setting this to be something more real-worldy a little bit with the settings. So you'll actually notice, so like I happen to stumble across a setting that like seems to work pretty well. Like it looks like this edge is like more or less parallel with this edge is kind of parallel here. So I'll shift that back over and like see that's actually like kind of not horrible. I might just sort of shift this over. Yeah, I mean that's like honestly not bad. Shrink my table a little bit. But I might just sort of like call that a day. I can grab these vertices here and move them over. And now I have something that looks like a reasonable facsimile of this table. And I mean, it might be a little bit hard to see, but I'll scale this person up, and now I can pretty much move it around, and it will more like this. You can already tell like the angle of this looks like it's sitting on the table, more than if I just sort of like moved my camera around and was like, I guess this kind of looks right. Yeah. So does anyone have any questions about like why you need to sort of block in this geometry to begin with, or like how to adjust your camera to kind of match what you have here? All right. The one thing I want to mention this very specifically. One thing that you 100% should not do, because it's terrible practice. You can kind of fudge it for background objects sometimes, but like for your main floor, it's good to get the thing set up properly. Would be to go through and be like, oh, okay, like what if I just sort of stretch this, like maybe this end doesn't quite look like it should, or like this. If I start moving the geometry around, like it might look correct in this render view, but if I go back into my perspective camera, like you can see that this is no longer, like I've bent my plane and it's like no longer rectangular or whatever. Like it's not a great way to work, because it's gonna make, when you light this, it's gonna like start casting shadows in like really weird spots. So it's like not great practice to sort of just like throw your camera in and then make like an oddly shaped cube to fit stuff. Any questions on why that's not good? All right. So at this point, what I might do, like now that I have like just some basic facsimile of a ground thrown in here, what I might do is go in and just like start adding some lights to the scene and seeing what happens. I'm gonna make my render size tinier because I can. It will speed up the demonstration considerably. So I'm gonna go into my Arnold render view here, and I will just start this. Oh, actually, one thing before I get really deep into this render, once you have your camera set up in the appropriate position with like good focal lengths and stuff, you should fix it down in one of two ways so that you don't accidentally move it. Like if I'm just like, oh, like I'm just working in my scene like this, then I'm like, oh shoot, I've botched my entire angle of my camera. So you can actually Alt-Z is undo the last camera move. So like if I do this, I can, again, Alt and Z will undo your last camera move. But that only gets you so far. Like you can move your camera to the point where it's like, no more undos, and then you're kind of like screwed and you need to manually set everything up again. So there's two ways that you can set your camera. If I select the camera in the outliner, go into my channel box, I can just grab all of these attributes, right click on them, and do lock selected. Lock. Once I do that, you'll see it puts this like little blue, sort of blue bar thing next to all the values that just tells you that they're locked. So if you ever see that on any of your models, that's what it means. If I needed to unlock this for any reason, I could just select the attributes and go right click and go unlock selected, and then I will be able to modify those values. For now, I'm just gonna lock them really quick. So you'll notice, like, if I try to move my camera now, I'm trying to pan, I'm trying to zoom, I'm trying to like do everything, and I can't do it because I have locked those attributes. I can now no longer modify these. I'm actually curious what happens if I yeah, even if I type in manually like 90 into here, it will not change them. So that's like probably the safest way to lock your camera in place. There is another method which I prefer because it suits my laziness. So I'm gonna unlock these guys really quick, and you can see now I can freely move my camera again. So usually what I will do, just because I prefer it, I will set a single keyframe on my camera. And basically what that'll do, if I don't overwrite the keyframe, oh, what have I done? What? Wait. Really? Oh, that's super annoying. I did this before and it like broke my... really quick. Oh, that's... Alright. Cool. Not entirely sure what happened there. I've been having an issue with this all morning where, like, if I try to render it, like, puts my camera somewhere else where it's not, and I don't really know why. But, anywho, that just did it again. But anywho, so the method that I usually prefer for locking my camera in place is, again, I'll just add a single keyframe to it. So if I'm just, like, randomly, I'll be all on frame 20. It doesn't really matter where you put the keyframe. Down here... Did I, like, parent this to something? I shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, so down here is your time slider. And this is, like, where... I need to stop doing that. You can set your keyframes there. So, like, if you're doing an animation, keyframe is basically just, like, at this specific point in time, I would like this value to be... Yeah, that's super weird. I would like this value to be like where Maya basically interpolates and like moves your object to. Usually to set a keyframe, I'll just hit S. That'll key all of these values here. So you'll notice that when I key it, it'll put a little red bar next to the attributes. If I go to a different frame, the bar turns pink. That just says that the frame is keyed, but it's not keyed on this frame. So like here, frame 16, there's no like little red mark for the keyframe. Back on frame 20, that little red mark is hanging out there. So any questions about setting keyframes? All right. I'm honestly not entirely sure why this keeps snapping my model back here. It's... Oh... That's been my issue all the time. Oh my god, okay. If you ever need to get rid of a keyframe, I realized that my issue was that this model itself was keyed, and now I'm incredibly salty. If you ever need to get rid of a keyframe, just select the attributes, and you can get rid of all of the keyframes by right-clicking and going Break Connections, and that will, you can see the red bar is gone. This is no longer a keyed value. If I... So like say I put a keyframe here, that was stupid. I'll key this here and I'll key this here. So like if I scrub back between these, you can see that it'll basically, the computer sort of interpolates between the values here on frame 14 and the values here on frame 20. It'll sort of like shift your stuff back and forth. You can delete an individual keyframe by just mousing over it in the time slider here, right clicking, and do delete. And the little red bar saying that there's a keyframe here is gone. You can see that the values that used to have like red, I'm keyframed on this frame mark, are gone. And now if I go back to 20, that's the only keyframe there. In this case, I'm just going to delete that keyframe as well. I am incredibly salty that that was my issue the entire time. I was like freaking out about this for like an hour this morning. Anywho. But yeah. So basically, what I was going before? With the camera, sorry. So if you put one single keyframe on your camera, just like hit S to key all of the values, I can shift my camera around all I want. And if I then hover over a different keyframe, it'll snap that camera back to exactly where it was. The reason that I prefer doing it like this is just because then I don't need to like take the extra 4 seconds to like switch around to get my other cameras. I can like, you know, go back in and like modify geometry and modify it in this camera view, and then just like pop back to where I was 10 seconds ago where I need the final render to be. Any questions about that? All right. Kind of random. You can use whichever method you prefer. It really doesn't matter. The only thing, if you do decide to use the keyframe method, you want to make sure that there's a little button right here in the corner. It's like the, if you mouse over, it's the auto keyframe toggle. You want to make sure that that is turned off. If it's turned on, it'll have like a little red box around it. But basically what that does is if I change the camera values at all, it will automatically key those values, and that'll pretty much just overwrite your existing keyframe and key your camera back to some weird position you weren't expecting. So again, you just want to make sure that that is turned off if you are using that method. All right, but anyway, so now the camera is actually kind of set up where you want. I might go in and just start reset the size of my renders. I actually like rendering insanely tiny. Like I usually start off with like a 540 by 304 render. I'm also usually working on my laptop, so that makes more sense. But so I'm just going to start this render. And as oh, I see. I left a light in my scene. So I have my existing lights just like from my original scene in here. So I might actually just go through and sort of modify them to be a little bit, I guess, more accurate with what I want for the scene itself. So I'll hide the ground plane just because I think it makes it a little bit easier to see how this looks in relation to the background. So I'll grab this light here, my window light, and you can see here that there's like really intense lighting and like crazy highlights on everything here. So I'm going to punk into my attribute editor and see what values I can make this that achieve that effect. That is perhaps too aggressive. Holy crap. But I feel like this value of like 5 million maybe isn't terrible. Maybe even go with 6 million. Like honestly, I feel like that kind of fits with like the really bright highlights on the rest of things. I think I like 5 better. So you just like put that in. And then the other thing that I'll usually do, like, so I'll turn on the shadows, and I do want to make sure that my shadows are kind of going in the correct direction. And in the end, I'll go over this later in the end, but there's a material that's really awesome with Arnold, and most of the fancy new rendering engines like Redshift and RenderMan will have like the similar thing, just like different name. But it'll basically only render the shadows that appear on this object. So if I right click on this, I will go to Assign New Material, go down to my Arnold shaders, and it's called Shadow Matte. So I want the AI Shadow Matte. Once I assign that, you can see that the object itself is no longer rendered, but that shadow appearing on it is rendered. And you can see it's going in the completely wrong direction. This is like bad Photoshopping 101. So I do want to I'll pop back into my perspective camera and just, like, where is this light? And maybe just like tweak this until the shadow is going in a less stupid direction. And if I bring it up, it'll shorten the shadow a little bit. I think maybe if this is like slightly taller than the soda bottle, that like maybe feels kind of accurate. And then, cool. I might also just like rotate my, ooh, whoops, deleted my light. I might just like rotate my figure ever so slightly, because I think that this is a more aesthetically appealing way for the object to be lit. All right, so you'll notice like when I click on something, it's like the only thing in the scene that's rendering. Like if I click on the statue, it'll render the statue and the image plane. If I click on this, it'll just render that shadow, not my character. That's because I have somehow turned on isolate select in my Arnold render view. If I unclick that, it'll start rendering everything. It's actually really handy if you only want to like test renders on a specific object without like manually hiding everything in your scene, but right now I don't really want that. So any questions on anything that I've just done so far? All right. Does anyone have any observations? Like if you were looking at this image in a class and you were like, okay, tell me how this is, like tell me why you can tell this is photoshopped, what would you say? Yes? Is way blacker? Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's like ridiculously dark. To be honest, yeah. And then you'd also notice, maybe it's probably kind of hard because the shadow is like so aggressively dark. But like it's going over the keyboard, but it's not affecting the keyboard. Like you'd expect it to maybe wrap up a little bit around the keyboard here. Also, the shadow from this brisk can is going like straight across the bottom of this, and you just can't tell. So basically what you'd want to do is like add in a little bit more geometry into your scene so that like these shadows have something to interact with while you're rendering. The first thing I'll try to fiddle with is the shadow color being like aggressively dark. So if I'll select my window light, and if you go down, just turn off cast shadows. But you can like sort of fiddle with the slider settings to adjust the, I guess, like darkness of the shadow. Normally also, this is like really weird, but like normally the shadows will be black. You'll just sort of leave it black. In this case, it actually looks like the shadows are almost like a blue-green color. It might be kind of hard to see on the projector, so I might actually change the shadow color slightly, which is like probably the first time I've ever had to do this. But I'll just like, you know, maybe make it ever so slightly bluer. And I feel like this kind of matches up a little bit better. There's perhaps more elegant ways to modify this camera. But yeah. Like normally I'll leave the shadow density as is. I think actually one of the reasons that this is so insanely bright is that it's really, the light is like insanely intense. So I'm just gonna try to like move it over a little bit. Maybe sort of get back the shadow shape that I had. You can see that like changing the distance of this light like dramatically affects how the shadow shows up. I'm just gonna say sure, that's fine. That's actually not completely horrible. All right, I might still just like rotate this figure a little bit because I'm not crazy fan of like these aggressive shadows on the face. But anyway, so I'm gonna like say that's probably reasonable. Normally, so like you'll notice with the soda can here, there's like a little bit of a darker shadow down here, which isn't really reflected over here. Again, I think that's just because my light's a little bit aggressively bright. But yeah, so I mean for now, I'm just gonna call that good. And I'm gonna go back in and again, like I said, I'll add a little bit more geometry into this scene to like replicate the basic shape of like the soda can and the keyboard so that those shadows can actually be cast on the object itself. So I'm just gonna throw in a cylinder. I'll try to position it like kind of close to where the actual can looks like, which I clearly did a terrible job of. Anywho, so I might scale this down a wee bit. I also don't need this to be rendered, but yeah. So I'll just like scale that down, maybe push it a little closer to the table, scale this area up. It's actually kind of annoying to model in this mode, but like you can, because it's like I just want to get closer to it, but I can't. You know what I mean? Like it's actually kind of frustrating to me. But I want to get, so like you'll notice in the shadow of the can, it's not just a cylinder, like it does have that taper at the top, and that is actually reflected in the shadow. So I don't need to go into great detail, but I do want to like block that in at least really roughly. So I'll just like extrude this top face, maybe pull it up, and then scale it down, move it down like a tiny bit. Again, I'm just sort of trying to briefly recreate the shape of this can. I might also do the bottom faces real quick and just be like, okay, cool, there's like a random taper here, yay. Good enough for the bottom of the can. For the top of the can, I might go through and I do kind of want that little like lip at the top. I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference in the shadow, but it'll take like 4 seconds to add. So I just scaled down that face. Oh. Cough. All right. See, so I got my camera out of alignment. I just like scrubbed through some frames and it put it back where I wanted it. So I'm gonna go back into perspective view because it's gonna be easier to deal with. I'll make this edge a little bit wider. And be like, yay, and just grab these guys and just extrude them casually up like so. Now I have like a really janky shaped soda can. I might go through and like add a few edge loops to sort of like harden that edge a little bit so it's a little bit more accurate with the can. Do something like that and be like, cool, you get the point, it's a soda can. And you can see like it matches up pretty well with the can here. And that's partially because I modeled it in place, but also I have the focal length and stuff of the camera set reasonably well. So that it's actually doing a relatively good job of like taking this normal shaped can and like adding the perspective from the camera. So if I go back up to my render view again, Arnold, what am I doing? Render view. So I'll just start this render. And, all right. What has happened? Oh, that's good. Yeah, okay. So I was actually having this issue a lot. So like in wireframe it looks great, but this can is absolutely just clipping through the floor of, totally clipping through the floor there. Turns out I actually need like 2 more edge loops in this. Go back to my perspective view because it's gonna be easier to deal with. Add edge loops thusly. And so you can actually kind of see, it might be a little bit hard to tell, but if you look at this, like the can is like, it looks like it's positioned kind of like slightly forward of the statue. So if I move this forward, I'll just like shift the can around until it kind of lines up a little bit with the can again. If I go back into my my view here, you can see that it like kind of matches up, but now it looks like I need to maybe make the whole thing slightly smaller. Because I just modeled it at like a really stupid size. So I'll just shift it around and like scale it down until it kind of fits back over my can. And incidentally, you'll actually notice by doing this, it has highlighted another fun problem where like this shadow is not even close to accurate with this shadow, so I'm gonna have to shift my light around again. Anyone have any questions about what I'm doing?
So when you're adding like that like extra geometry,
yeah.
like does it have to be like crazy detailed with like n-gons and stuff like if it's not that essential?
Yeah, I mean for the most, you're never really rendering that geometry itself. So as long as it's not doing anything like really like super crazy, you can pretty much. I left n-gons in the scene from earlier, and I'm like it's fine. I didn't even smooth this stuff from earlier, honestly. For the soda can, I smoothed it because it's round, but like, meh. But yeah, so I'm just gonna try to like shift my lights around a little bit to maybe make this a little bit, the shadow kind of match up slightly better. My general like kind of questionable policy with shadows is like, and this doesn't work for more complex renders, but for something like this where I just need the shadow like coming over the edge of the object here, would be like, if I can see, like if this edge lines up with the shadow in the picture, doesn't matter what this is doing because this is not anything in my image that I'm gonna be worried about like compositing back in. So like a lot of times I will just shamelessly ignore that completely. But yeah, so in this case, I might actually just sort of call this halfway decent. I'll see what my shadow, yeah, I mean, that still kind of looks not completely awful to me. Like I said, this is the very like untechnical, janky way to sort of like wing compositing. And now I might just like add in a really quick keyboard. If I was feeling fancy, like I should model the keys into this, I'm not going to, because honestly, that just is, that would be like a silly waste of everyone's time to just watch me like model rectangles into other rectangles. What do I do? So I'm just gonna like throw this over here, and I'll maybe, I'll sort of like shift this into position, stop my render, and go back into my, I do actually think it's easier to, I think it's easier to an extent to model in here. What if I bring that over manually? Cool. I'm gonna change the pivot so it's easier for me to like move this thing around. And I'll just try to line up like the corner of this with the actual corner of the keyboard here. Perhaps something like this. And in this case, so like this keyboard is actually slanted off the ground. So if I were to go in and like grab the back vertices of this and like physically shift them up, that would not be a bad thing to do in this case, because that is actually pretty much matching, like, this is like basically what the Mac keyboard does. So like in this case, winging it isn't a terrible thing to do. And again, you can see that that pretty much matches like kind of closely to the keyboard that I have here. Might pull these in a little bit more. So the one thing that so like this keyboard has like really like tapered round edges. This weird keyboard that I've added in very much does not. So the other thing that I might do is go in and just like grab these edges here. Just like these two corner edges are the ones I have selected. And I'm just gonna, I'll do a quick bevel on them. I just did Control B. And I'll just like very loosely match like the bend of that keyboard here. And this is like one of those instances where like, look, there's like a bajillion n-gons in my scene now, and I really just don't care. Like at all. And it actually looks like this whole keyboard might be slightly like turned slightly on the desk, so I'll just like turn it a little bit. Be like, hey, it's keyboard, cool. All right, so if I go back into my render view, I will start this render again, and you'll notice that like, hey, there's like an awkward keyboard floating here. And you can see that the shadow is actually wrapping around the keyboard a little bit better. What I will do is I'm going to go through and I'll grab these new objects and assign them the shadow matte, so that the geometry is gone, but again, you still get that little shadow in there. So you can see like the Briscan is here, and I still get the shadow from the crappily modeled in Briscan, and I get this nice wraparound on the keyboard without actually having the keyboard in there. Any questions about that? Cool. It is a good idea, so like it is actually important to line up your geometry properly-ish, because like if I made this keyboard and it was like really inaccurate over here, it's gonna, like, if you look at that corner, it's like clearly, the shadow is clearly in the wrong spot. And that's, again, because the geometry itself is in the wrong spot, it's not lined up with the image. So that's, ooh, what have I done? Ah, I see. So that's why it's important to line up your geometry so that like it wraps around that corner like kind of more like you would expect. Again, if you wanted to get really fancy on it, you'd like just add in these like little keys over here. You could just do like these 3 keys because they're the only ones really affected by the side of the shadow. But you could model those in if you wanted to, and it would give you an even better effect, but not for the purposes of today's demonstration. All right, so here's my can. And let's just say that like maybe I don't find this completely repellent of a look. It does really bother me that like that shadow doesn't line up. I might spend like 2 minutes. So there are settings for these lights that I usually don't end up fiddling around with, but I actually might in this case. So if I go into my attribute editor on the light, if I adjust the spread of that light, okay, that actually doesn't really do anything. Like I'm literally just fiddling with settings, kind of seeing if anything does anything terribly interesting in terms of the size of the shadow. As it turns out, nothing really affected it. I'm curious, like, so like, I've actually yet to find a better way to adjust the size of your light in Arnold besides scaling it, even though scaling it is like usually kind of bad, but you can see it does give you a softer shadow if you need that. But yeah, so I might just call it a day for now, honestly. It's fine. All right, so in this case, if I wanted to get out some like finalish looking renders of this thing, what I might do is, don't need that isolate select thing on. So there's, I guess, a few different ways to render this. First of all, you want to go through and make sure that all of your samples and stuff are correct. Like, if you're looking at, you know, the edges of the shadows, like ideally they would be smooth and nice looking. In this case, they are always going to look terrible because I'm rendering a 300 pixel image. So if I go in and re-render this, this is my perspective camera, isn't it? Okay, cool. All right, there we go. So you'll notice that like the shadows like along this edge here are like maybe a little bit soft and a little bit fuzzy. That's something that I usually go through in the light itself and adjust that setting. So I'll just click on my light. You'll see this little button for samples. I might try bumping it up to 5. And you can see that makes the edge like a little bit smoother. And in this case, I have the samples and stuff set from like the stuff down here pretty reasonably. So I'm just going to ignore those for now. But yeah, so, all right. So here's like my final render. But clearly like there's like some weird overlapping with the shadows from this. I'm going to save this just as an example. New render, straight render. I'm just going to save this as a JPEG. Cool. So the buttons up here, in case I've never mentioned specifically what they were, this little button, I mean, this is isolate select. So like if I have my ground selected, it's basically only going to render my ground. You know, I select the figure, again, it's only going to render the figure, that kind of thing. RGB will cycle between the red, green, and blue channels. Like we just keep clicking on this. Here's the alpha channel. So in this case, the shadow map basically works like, here's my figure, that's going to be completely opaque. And then the shadows here are like ever so slightly less opaque. There's like a little bit of transparency to them. This whole background, anywhere that's black, is just going to be see-through in your image, and then the image plane is rendering, it's just rendering in the background, which in this case I kind of actually don't want. So what I'm going to do is just go into my, I'm actually just going to grab this render plane, which for some reason they don't show up in your render, or in your outliner, it seems like, if you put them on a perspective camera. So I'm just going to grab it here and just delete it. Not the most elegant way to work, but you'll see that it now doesn't render my background in. If I go back to luminance, RGB, so I look at my RGB, it basically just looks like a sad little figure is just like hanging out here. But again, so if I go into my alpha channel, in this case I'm hitting A, you can see that there is actually shadow information here. I'm just not seeing it in the display. So I'm going to save this image. I will save this as shadows. I'm probably actually going to have to do a few passes for like the shadows. But this is actually important. I need to type in specifically TIFF, because I found earlier that like if I saved it as a PNG, like the color stuff, or like the shadows don't show up well in Photoshop, which is honestly incredibly annoying. So I'm going to find that image that I just rendered. The new render shadows TIFF, throw that into Photoshop. I will throw the cropped background image into Photoshop as well. Huzzah. And I'll order them, and you can see that it pretty much like composites the renders together. So again, so here's the image where you can actually like see the transparency in the shadows. You can see the figure existing there. And when I turn on the background, it pretty much looks like the render in Maya when I had the image plane in. So any questions about this? All right. I still need to like do a little bit of tweaking because like I don't want this shadow here. Like I don't want this double shadow on the soda can. It looks ridiculous. So what I'm probably going to do is just like fiddle a little bit and like hide some stuff with the renders. So one thing that I can actually do, which didn't occur to me to try that until just now. What I could do is just like hide, if I hid this ground plane, I would only get the shadow information on, so like here's my figure, and I only get the shadow of that figure, or that soda can, sorry, on the figure itself. And it's not on the ground plane because, again, the ground plane is hidden. So the like super awkward thing I could do potentially is just go through and like selectively hide these shadows. So if I'll just let's see, I'll hide this keyboard as well. If you look at my alpha, now it should really only be the figure itself and this like gross little thing on top of the soda can. So I'll save this as my, where is it? New render. What do I need to save this as? What am I doing? New render, can, shadow. Again, there's like kind of more elegant ways to do this, but like I think this is probably like the most straightforward way. So I'll just save a version of this basically with the keyboard and the can showing, or I'm sorry, one with only the can shadow visible, and one with the shadow on the ground and the keyboard visible. So in this case, I'm just going to hide the can. Again, I'll look at my alpha channel, and you'll see that I have all of the other shadows unrelated to the can here. So I will save this one. Slowly. Call it new render table keyboard shads. Hopefully I remembered to save the other one as .tiff. Don't think I did. All right, so now I have these two other images here that I can use. So if I bring both of these guys into Photoshop, crud nuggets. I totally saved this one as a PNG, so I actually need to go back and re-render that one a little bit. That's super weird. Oh, duh, because wait, hang on, sorry. New render, straight render. Okay, I dragged the wrong files in, sorry. All right, so here's the render with just the person, no soda can shadow, but it does have that sort of shadow on the keyboard background. And then the other one I botched saving the file, so I need to re-render it. This is, like, again, why you need to save TIFF, because I saved it as a PNG and none of the transparency actually showed up, which is always irritating. So if I just add this back in again, I will save this file once more with the proper name, new render can shadow only .tiff, not PNG. I'll go back and again, I'll just take that file, throw it into Photoshop, and you can see it's actually comped the person over the other person, but I do have that little shadow right on the sort of plinth of the statue, and it's not, I don't have this like crazy double shadow here. The one thing I will do, so you'll notice like it does put like a gross artifact up there, so I'll just make a layer matte and just sort of scribble that out casually with a larger brush. Yay. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much how I would comp that together. Are there any questions about this? All right. There's one other thing that you can do that's like pretty easy and has like a really sweet looking effect. So in this case, so you notice like a lot of times, like if you look at this other image that I did, you'll notice like this little piece of filament has a little bit of a shadow like right where it's connecting to the table. It's good to try to recreate that in the base of your object if you can. So what I'm actually going to do for this is I will turn my table back on. I'm just going to stop this render real quick. Go back to my render cam. And I'm actually just going to grab both of these objects, duplicate them, group them, and I'll just hide these. So if I take these guys, I just literally just made a random duplicate so I can assign a new material to it. I'll right click and assign a new material, go to my Arnold shader tab, and just assign this AI ambient occlusion material to that. So if I render it now, I think ambient occlusion passes are gorgeous. I don't know why. I just think they're really pretty. But it'll give me this like weird little ambient occlusion pass. And you'll notice that it should make like a little bit of a shadow around the base of this guy. But basically anywhere there's geometry that's like really close to each other, so like, especially like between this hood, it's gonna add like a little bit of extra shadow in. This is something that a lot of time will be sort of baked in like game passes. You'll bake in ambient occlusion into the textures, that kind of thing. You can also fiddle a little bit with the settings of this ambient occlusion. So like if I play with fall off, it adjusts where those shadows where the shadows show up. So I can like twiddle with this until I get something that I'm like maybe happy with. I'm just gonna sort of say that that's fine, sure, whatever. And then there's also, in this specific shader, there's like samples, but in this case I think it looks like reasonably not horrible. I might add like a 4th sample in there. So in this case I'll just render this guy out. Cool, it is done. I will save this, and again, I want this to be a TIFF. Go, .tiff. And now I can just throw this into Photoshop, and this is like the easiest possible thing to comp in. Like literally just drag this on top and set this to be multiply, and you're basically done. I mean, this actually did kind of like awkward stuff around the base of this can. But you can see that like if I toggle this layer on and off, it just like adds a little bit of shadow like right here under the chin, and like in the arm. Again, just gives like a little bit of extra shadow depth. Like I wouldn't expect, this is without IO, I wouldn't expect this to be so like glowy and awkward, but with that ambient occlusion in there, it's like a little bit like more shadowy like you might expect. But yeah, so I mean this is like more or less what you'll be doing for your final, when you actually like render the final thing. But this week, just get your basic setup set up with like throw in, take the background picture you're gonna use, block in like the basic geometry like the can and stuff, and then you can tweak like the lighting and the shadows and all of that stuff later, like the textures of your object, but like just get all the basic stuff blocked in. Theoretically, it shouldn't take more than like an hour or two, theoretically. But yeah, so any questions on that? All right. What am I saying? Think about things.